and caused a big problem for Jesus later, right? Judas, who betrayed Jesus. But he was one of the 12 that Jesus called to him. And so those guys had an eyeball-to-eyeball conversation with the physical Jesus throughout their lives, and he called them to them and tasked them to continue his message after he died on the cross and was raised again and ascended into heaven. He said, go and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. And they did. They did some amazing things. But Paul wasn't one of them, was he? No. Paul was actually a very righteous and religious Jew who'd studied under some of the best rabbis that there were at the time, that knew the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible that the Jews based their entire living around. He knew that stuff inside and out. This guy was on the path to success. He's going to tell us about it here in a minute in his own words. And he's going out to stop the Jesus message from happening. And while he's on the road, Jesus encounters him in a way that Jesus didn't encounter anybody else. Because Christ had gone to heaven. Jesus had been in heaven when he appears to Paul. Unlike any of the other apostles that were called, Paul has this special encounter with Jesus. And let me tell you, if you had to run into one or the other, Jesus the physical form on earth or Jesus the glorified form from heaven, I think I'd much rather run into the physical one on earth because I think it'd be a lot less intimidating and a lot less scary. But Paul, he didn't get that option. And it changed his entire trajectory of life, this encounter. So when he says, I am an apostle, he is truly an apostle. Not one of the 12 that Jesus called face to face, but one that was called in a special and unique way later on. Not by man or by a man, he says, but by Jesus himself, glorified. Saul, he says, Saul, why are you persecuting me? And Saul's like, God? And Jesus like, yeah, buddy, knock it off. Okay, so let's keep that as just like verse 1. We got more verses. Okay, so Jesus Christ and God the Father, he says, those are the ones who appeared to him and called him to be an apostle, who raised him from the dead. God raised Jesus from the dead, and all the brothers and sisters with me. So he's saying, once you put your faith in this Jesus, and in God who raised him from the dead, then we're all, once we have faith in him, we're all going to be raised from the dead. All of us. Raised from the dead. All the brothers and sisters with me. And by the way, this is to the churches in Galatia. Grace and peace to you from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. Pretty typical way to introduce a letter back then. Today we say hello. Some of you say salutations. No? You don't say that in? Okay, good. Because that'd be weird. Grace and peace to you from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ, who gave himself, voluntarily gave himself for our sins to rescue us from the present evil age according to the will of God and Father. That's the gospel, guys. That one sentence sums it up. Jesus came to earth, God's Son, fully God, fully man, walked the earth, lived a life that we're not capable of living because he was sinless, in order to offer his life for yours and for mine. Because God's righteous demands says that justice must be resolved when it comes to how we're born and what we're born into, this human condition that is sinful. It's not just about you guys making a mistake or deliberately doing something wrong. It's a condition that you're born into that you cannot escape on your own. And Jesus said, I will voluntarily switch places with you and take the punishment that you deserve so that you can get the righteousness that I have. That's the gospel. It's a switch. Jesus said, I'll take your life so you can have mine. I'll take your life so you can have mine. That's the gospel message. And that is good news because we know that the wages, what sin pays off how sin resolves is not good. It's death. It leads to separation from God forever because God cannot stand before sin. Sin cannot stand before God. He just can't have it. He's just, perfectly just. And so not an iota of injustice can stand before God. But Jesus lived perfectly and says, you can have my life and I'll take yours. And I'll pay for the fault in yours to free you from the evil age. Now the evil age is for sure what's coming. Like in the future, things aren't going to get better, guys. I'm sorry. It's going to get worse. Things are going to get worse. This world is not going to last forever. It just won't. Your lives will not last forever. Some of them will be cut tragically short. Some of them will end in that way where your body starts to betray you and you wish that you could do the things that you used to be able to do, but you just can't ski at 80. I mean, you shouldn't. Maybe you could try it. Might not end well for you, right? So, for sure, there's an evil age ahead that will result in God coming and saying, okay, now I need to settle this score. And you'll either be with Him or you'll be cast out of His presence, separated from God, which sounds like a pretty scary place. But that's not all that says. It says to rescue us from the present evil age. See, once you put your faith in Jesus, once you say, yes, I'll take your offer. I believe that you came to do this for me and for anybody else that will believe. I believe that you came to do that, and I'm going to start living like I believe that. When you make that transaction with God, He says, your future starts now. It's rescuing you from the present evil. You're no longer kind of caught up in all of the things that you were caught up in before you put your faith in Him. You have freedom to live differently because He's rescuing you from the present evil age. Do we always recognize that freedom? No. Sometimes it's just easier to live the way that we know how to live, and that is through our flesh, through those desires that kind of come along with being born into this human nature. It's a little bit more difficult to decide to live like Him and to follow Him and allow Him to change our hearts and our desires and our appetites from the inside out. But that's what He's willing to do. That's why He died on the cross. He gave Himself for our sins to rescue us. This word rescue, and I was going to show you guys a really cool thing, okay, that I thought all of you would appreciate. It was going to be one of those quick videos that, sometimes we like flash in front of people in churches when the pastors think they're really cool and they're going to pull some of this modern thing into it, but I can figure it out. Okay, so I'm just going to share the story with you, and I could try and it would have been on YouTube, and we'd have to sit through like 12 seconds of a commercial. You know how those things like your ad or your video will play after this ad, and I don't know why. I don't want to watch the ad. I just want to watch the video. So I'm going to set it up for you. In Super Bowl 50, one of the greatest Super Bowls ever. Okay, there's this one play where the star MVP dancing competition guy was able to kind of make his name known. And if you remember what happened, Cam Newton is playing against the Denver Broncos. Okay? The best team in the league. And so the ball snapped. Cam's a great quarterback, but for whatever reason, Vaughn is way better than Cam. Okay? And Von Miller comes off of the line and comes after Cam, and Cam is almost like, doesn't even see him coming. And Vaughn grabs the football right out of the quarterback's hand. You remember that? I was going to play the video, but I couldn't figure out how to make it happen, okay? And then we had to watch all of Vaughn's greatest hits, and then it would have been like Broncos Sunday, and that's not yet, okay? We're going to wait for Broncos Sunday, okay? And so anyway, he like snatches the ball out of Cam Newton's hand, and Cam's like, what just happened? And then he cried. But in the meantime, the ball goes kind of flying in the end zone, and remember Malik Jackson jumps on the ball in the end zone, and we go up 9-0 in the first quarter of the Broncos' best game ever played. And so, this word rescue, okay, who gave Himself for our sins to rescue, is the same kind of word that we would use to define that play when Von Miller tears that football out of the quarterback. That's rescue. See, this word means to tear from a power. That something has ensnared something and is holding on to something and is not letting something go. But Jesus comes and he says, I'm going to snatch you right out of the opponent's arms, and I'm going to score a touchdown with you, and I'm going to spike you on your head. Does the football have any control in that play? No. No. See, footballs are born into footballhood. No football was ever like, I'm going to make myself a football player. You can't! You're full of pigskin and air. And some teams more air than others, right? Guys, you were the footballs. Truly. And Jesus said, I'm going to come for you. Like Von Miller said, Cam, I'm coming for you. And he snatches you right out of the opponent's hand. And you have no control over that because he's God and you're not. You're just a player in the game. You're just the ball in a person's hand. I mean, that's all there is to it. You don't have it. There's no way you could have rescued yourself. There's no way. And that's the condition that people are under in today's society and have been since the beginning, since the fall of mankind. They have no control, except that God said, I'm coming to help you. I'm going to rescue you. I'm going to redeem you. See, redemption's kind of the same idea. Somebody's got a hold on something, and they're hanging on tight, and they don't want to let their captive go. But Jesus said, I'm going to pay for you. That's what that's all about. That's the gospel, guys. While you were unable to do anything for yourself, Christ came for you. He lived for you. He died for you. And he made an exchange that you'll never find anything better than in your life. That's the gospel. Where are we? He gave himself for our sins to rescue us from the present age of life. And it's according to the will of God the Father. To him, no wonder we should glorify him and honor him forevermore, because he is worthy. Anybody that's willing to put their life on the line for you, man, we owe them a great debt of gratitude. Jesus put his life on the line for you. Now, remember, Paul had come, he set up these churches, he explained this gospel message to them, and he said, you guys are on your own, I'm going to go start some more churches. And they're like, cool, he's out, you know? And so he goes back, and then all of a sudden, I don't know how many years later, I don't know what the time frame was from when he established these churches to when he's writing this letter, okay? I should have looked that up, but I didn't even think about it. But so, something went off the rails, though, and he's writing them to correct the something. So verse 6 says, I am astonished that you're so quickly deserting the one who called you to live in the grace of Christ and are turning to a different gospel, which is really no gospel at all. Evidently, some people are throwing you into confusion and are trying to pervert the gospel of Christ. Here's the thing, guys. There are not two gospels. There's one. The one gospel is Jesus, fully God, fully man, came to earth to live perfectly, to offer his life in exchange for yours, to make you righteous before God so that you can live with God forever. That's the gospel. Remember, you're the football, he's Von Miller. Okay? That's the gospel. Anything beyond that, or in addition to that, or anything different than that, that is not the gospel. By faith, you are saved through grace. God's grace, you couldn't help yourself. God's like, oh, I'm going to show them grace, and so I'm going to offer my son for them. All you have to do is put your faith in him. There's no works that are required. Like, now you must commit your life to giving all your money away, living in sackcloth, and moving to wherever, right? Just think of the worst place. That's not the gospel. What was happening here was because Jesus was a Jew, and because a lot of the teachings that he had came out of the scriptures that they had, They believed that to become a good Christian, you first had to become a proper Jew. Like, everybody's saved by faith. Okay, we'll give you that. But then we've got this law. We've got all of these provisions that God gave us down through the generations that we have to follow. So if you're going to be a good Christian, you first have to be a good Jew. And so they're coming into town saying everybody that's accepted Jesus that isn't circumcised needs to be circumcised. Now, that'd be a showstopper for most of us, would it not? I mean, look. That's a pretty big commitment, if you ask me. I don't know. At that point, I'm like, yeah, let me think about it, all right? So people are coming into town, and they're saying, okay, not only do you have to have faith in God and in Jesus and in His Word, now you've got to do all of these things. You've got to, and it wasn't just that. I mean, there was a list of things, a litany of things that they had to obey. Certain ceremonies, certain cleanly habits, certain food eating, certain this, that, and the other thing. I mean, it was a long list. And circumcision was on that list, and it was kind of the preeminent thing because, yeah. He said, why are you turning to that? Because the different gospel, the false gospel, anything that's not gospel, that stands in contrast to the true gospel, is grace plus work, faith plus law. All of that is off base. All of it is off base. See, they were saying, to become a proper Christian, you got to be a proper Jew. And Paul's like, no, guys. No. That's not how this works. It's by faith in grace alone that you're saved. So we look at this and go, yeah, wow, those people, man, I can't believe that they would let that happen. And that these others would come back into their towns and say, no, you need all this other stuff. But let me ask you a question. Based on what we talked about at the beginning, you've got all of these friends, right? In all of these different situations. And the message becomes, if we're not careful, guys, to be a proper Christian, you have to act like a Christian. It's not much different than what was happening then. I can't believe that he or she would listen to that. I can't believe that he or she would watch that. I can't believe that he or she would be struggling with that particular addiction or sin, or that they would vote that particular way, or that they would, have that particular attraction. I can't believe that because, come on, you got to be a proper Christian to be a proper Christian. It's not much different, is it, than what they were saying back then. This message is important for us today, as much as it was to them back then. Anytime, we're going to talk about this in just a minute, you add to this gospel, you're taking something from God. And you're putting yourself in a position that's nearly impossible to live up to, and you're putting other people in a position that I guarantee you they'll fail at when we start adding to the gospel. So we've got to be very careful about that, just like what he was saying to them. Okay, as we've already said, did we finish that part? I don't even know. Oh yeah, we did. Okay, verse 7, which is really no gospel at all. They're throwing you into confusion, but he's going to make a point here. But even if he's saying, even if Paul himself, the writer of 2/3 of the New Testament, says differently, or even if angels from heaven should come and preach a gospel other than we preach to you, let them be under God's curse. It's important to recognize that there are religions that were founded based on this statement. They're not the true gospel, but they're being propped up and popularized and have grown like crazy over the years. But they're not the true gospel. And Paul very clearly says anything that's gospel plus is not the true gospel. So if even an angel shows up or Paul comes back from the dead and starts telling us, don't believe this, it's not true. He says they should be cursed. And then he continues in verse 9. as we've already said, he double emphasizes it, right? I'm going to say it again. If anybody's preaching to you a gospel other than the one that you've accepted, let them be under God's curse. I'm telling you what, guys, God's got some pretty incredible curses. We've seen them, right? Old Testament stuff. Like, how many of you want your house to be full of frogs, flies, rodents of any kind, boils, darkness? I mean, no. Right? So don't do it. Don't add to it. Verse 10, am I trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? These were some specific accusations that were coming to Paul, like, he just wants to be popular. Well, I'll tell you what. Paul's message was not very popular. I mean, he wasn't trying to please people. He was trying to please God. He said, if I was still trying to please people, I'd not be a servant of Christ, because it sounds to me like it was a pretty tough life for him. He spent a lot of time in prison. Shipwrecked. All kinds of crazy things. Verse 11 says, I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that the gospel I preached, remember what the gospel is? I'm going to keep asking because that's pretty important that you know that. Alright? The gospel that I preached was not of human origin. I didn't receive it from any man, nor was I taught it. Rather, I received it by the revelation from Jesus Christ. He wants to be very specific. He is an apostle called by Christ, but he didn't run to Jerusalem as soon as he was called and gather all of the other apostles together. It's like, Peter, teach me everything that you know about Jesus. That didn't happen right away. What's interesting is, if you read 1 Peter, it's almost as if Peter learned a lot more from Paul than Paul did from Peter. Okay? Once Paul received the message from Jesus that he was going to be an apostle, he went away with Jesus and spent time learning from Jesus. He didn't learn from anybody else. Why is that important? Because it's primary information. He was persecuting the church, and now he's learning as much as he can from Jesus. In private conversations, and kind of sequestered away someplace, alone, him and Jesus. Okay? And he tells us that again here in a second. He says, I did not preach this gospel that came from Peter or James or John or any of the other guys that were with him day to day. I preached something that came straight from him. I received it by revelation from Jesus Christ. For you've heard of my previous way of life in Judaism. Even if he had to go to those guys to learn this stuff, do you think they would have accepted him? Hey, here comes Paul. Let's welcome him with open arms and hope he doesn't shake us. You've heard of my previous, this is why, you've heard of my previous way of life in Judaism. He intensely persecuted the church of God, and he tried to destroy it. He had letters from the chief council that said he could. And he tells us in several places how violent this persecution was. Men, women, and children he persecuted. He put some of them to death, folks. He has a bad past. He would not have been received with open arms at Jerusalem. They'd have been like, yikes. He persecuted the church of God and tried to destroy it. I was advancing in Judaism beyond many of my own age or among my people, and was extremely zealous for the traditions of my father. And he was. He was on the fast track. This guy was like Harvard MBA at like 20. Most Harvard MBAs are not 20. Because you're not sure about Harvard MBAs. He's on his way to success in the Jewish culture and the Jewish religion. God stops him in his tracks and completely changes his trajectory. And instead of persecuting the church, he becomes a proponent of the gospel message. From zealous persecutor to zealous promoter. And he gives his life for it. Because 15 says, when God, who set me apart from my mother's womb and called me by his grace, was pleased to reveal his Son in me so that I might preach among the Gentiles, my immediate response was not to consult any human being. He says, listen, God decided he was going to use me way before. But when he revealed it to me through blinding him. This light appears on the road, and this voice from heaven says, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? He's like, what? He set him apart, called him by grace, and revealed his son to me. And Paul changed completely. He said, I didn't go up to Jerusalem and see those who were apostles before I was. I explained that to you already. But I went into Arabia, and later I returned to Damascus. Now there's a couple more verses at the end of this chapter 18, 19, 20, I'm not even sure, 21, 22, 23, however many there are, where he kind of explains this timeline. And it's still a little fuzzy. We're not really sure about all the details. But at some point, he goes away, he spends time with Jesus, learning from Jesus, and then he spends time learning from somebody else before he goes up to Jerusalem and meets with some of the other apostles, okay? And that's kind of how that winds up. But what I think we want to walk away from here is the change that occurred in Paul. That God is dying to show the world His glory through your life, like He did through Paul's life. There was no mistaking that Paul was a changed person, was there not? No mistaking. Probably some trust that had to be rebuilt, because I'm sure not everybody's like, oh, Paul, come on in, at first. He was a scary dude. But God's revealing Himself through Paul, through the change that happened in Paul's life. So what do we need to walk away from with this freedom gospel? Because it seems like there's a lot of different things happening here, right? Like Paul's explaining himself, Paul's trying to set something right, he sounds a little bitter. He's pretty angry. I understand why. This is pretty serious stuff. So let's take a look at what he's trying to say. See, he's saying that there's two things that we need to know. One, there's the gospel, and then there's the not gospel. There's the gospel, and there's the different gospel, which is really no gospel at all. There's the gospel, which really matters, and then everything else needs to go away. So what's the gospel? Remember, I told you I was going to ask you over and over and over again until you got it. The gospel is the good news of Jesus. See, when you see that Jesus died on the cross to set you free from your previous way of life, from the bondage that you're under, you may or may not even know that you're under it. That becomes really good news. Because you're no longer stuck. You're no longer trying to fill that hole in your heart with all of the things that the world says will fill it that you know doesn't. You're no longer trying to find your way. You've got a guide. It's Jesus. Because He says, follow me. Believe me and follow me. The good news of Jesus is that He died on the cross for your sins. He took the penalty for how you were born and what you do in your past, today, and in the rest of your life. He took the penalty for all of that to the cross. And He said, I'll take that penalty. I'll pay for that. So that you can be free. The good news of Jesus is that through what He did on the cross, you can be free. Who doesn't want to be free? The gospel message in these verses 1 through 5 that we looked at means that you can be saved by faith alone. You don't have to do anything else. You don't have to follow a certain set of rules or a certain set of laws or do a certain amount of work in order to gain heaven. You are saved by faith alone. That's it. Well, that's easy. Yeah, then why do we make it so hard? And why do we make it so hard for other people? You are saved by faith alone. You believe that Jesus did all the work on the cross for you, and that's what saves you. Faith alone. And faith brings freedom. See, Jesus died to set us free from that bondage, not to put us back into bondage. And here's the problem with that. Well, freedom. And I can do whatever I want. Then see, all of a sudden, there's all of these moral ambiguities. I can choose. I can actually, freedom breeds license, doesn't it? Like I can do whatever I want because I'm completely free and saved by grace and faith alone. I don't have to do anything anymore. I don't have to follow any rules. I don't have to abide by any laws. I am free. And that freaked a lot of people out. And that's why they added rules and they added laws. And that's why we do it today too. Because we're afraid of what true freedom means. Because we're afraid that somebody's going to continue to live in a way that we would consider sinful and unbiblical. We're afraid that they're never going to change, that they're just going to continue, that they're going to take advantage of everything that Jesus did because it was such a great cause. And that breaks our hearts to think that they wouldn't be changed by that work alone. Yeah, folks. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. But see, freedom shouldn't bring works, and it shouldn't bring law. Because all of those things, all that does is when we try to follow these rules and we try to follow these laws, is it brings us to a place of futility. For two reasons. One, you can't possibly be good enough. You can't. Stop trying to be good enough. Stop posting only good things on your Facebook pages or your Twitter pages or your Instagrams or your Snapchats, because we know that's not real life. We know that you're just making up that vacation picture. We know that those legs looking over a beach, we know that that's like a small little sliver of your life, and it probably cost you a mint just to get to that pretty beach resort. We know. Stop faking. Right? Thank you. Because no matter how hard you try, and no matter how much you do, you can never earn God's grace. Because God's grace is grace. And grace is given freely. Can't earn it. You don't deserve it. Stop pretending. See, if you set up all these rules for yourselves or other people, if you have all of this idea of what you've got to do, you're going to get to the end of your life and you go, well, that didn't really matter anyway. It's futile. You're going to be disappointed. And people are never going to live up to that. Man, this is good stuff. It brings futility. Stop killing yourself. God loves you, just like you are. The other thing that works and these laws that we follow do is it winds up saying God's not strong enough. Because the work that Jesus did on the cross was not enough. So I've got to do more. No, it was enough. It was sufficient. It's plenty. It's way more than you could ever do. So stop. The one thing that we have to do, though, if we're going to live by a law, is live by the law of love. See, what God says is, believe me, and believe that I am working in you. And all you have to do is just love. Just love one another. Love me. Love others. Love. That's it. Like I loved you. And see, that begins to change everything. Why? Well, look at this. I almost said next slide. And I'm up here going, slide here, it's right here. I don't have to tell somebody. I can just remind them. Here's what happens if we keep going down this course, okay? If we trust your works, or if you live by rules, or both, you begin to believe that it's up to individuals to change themselves, to heal their own wounds, to bind up their own brokenness, to look and act and think and live like the work or the rules require. If you find you or others cannot live up to the rules or works, you failed and you're not worthy. And worse, your God's not capable of making changes in people's lives. And really doesn't care. He's just there to judge. Oh, you failed again, Grim. Oh, you screwed up one more time. Right? Does that sound like the God of the Bible? No. No, but see, the freedom gospel says, as you love Jesus, why would you love him? Because of the gospel. You see everything that he did and gave up, and the pain and the sacrifice and the willingness, the voluntary option that he took, everything that you deserve with him to die on the cross for you. When you see that, you go, man, I love you, Jesus. You begin to trust him. Because don't you trust people you love? If you don't trust people you love, then we need to talk. Begin to trust that Jesus is powerful enough to transform the deepest, darkest places, people, and situations into lighthouses of grace Have you seen this happen? Yeah. Transformed zealots living gospel lives. Have you heard about that? Paul's a great example. And victorious outcomes. Like all of the darkness that this world can throw into these situations, all of the things that can happen negatively, when we trust Jesus, as we love Him and we trust Him and we watch Him work in our lives and in other people's lives, amazing things happen. So we no longer have to set up these standards or these rules, say, oh, you got to act like a Christian before you can be one. No. Man, come on, man. Let's just love one another. Let's love God together. And let's see what happens. We were sharing in group this week about a couple that used to come to our church years and years and years ago. They live in California now. When they started coming to our church, they were living together and they had 3 kids. They wanted to be baptized. Okay, you love Jesus? Let's baptize you. And we baptized them. And as we're watching them and encouraging them, pursuing God, they come and say, we really need to get married. We need help. Okay, what kind of help? Well, I don't know how to divorce. This lady had a previous husband that was like, I mean, the relationship had been over for a long, long time, long enough to have 3 kids with the guy that she was living with. Well, I don't know how to do it. Well, somebody walked alongside of her, helped her figure out how to do that. People were donating from our church like wedding sets so that they could have rings to exchange. We did the entire thing as a church family, like, just come on, we're going to do it. We married them. They're living happily together with their kids in California, attending church, having an incredible witness out there. Did we say, you can't live together to be baptized? No! We said, man, we just want to love you and show you God. And as you love Him, we trust that He's powerful enough to transform the deepest, darkest places. The deepest, darkest people. And take situations that are abysmal and difficult and turn them into incredible victories for Him. That is the God that we serve. That's the one. The gospel brings freedom. Because when we love people the way that Christ loved us, it brings transformation. When transformation occurs, we trust Jesus more. See, this is a mad cycle. It takes us deeper and deeper and deeper with Him. You know what happens when you trust Jesus more? More life change. More transformation. Wow, God, I'm really scared about our finances. I don't know that I can afford to give you anything, but I'm going to give you $10 this week. And probably that's all you're getting this month. He's like, oh, you lousy follower. No! He's like, fantastic, kid, come on! Let's see what happens. And you give him $10, and then instead of being $10 short that month, you're like, God worked all this out. How did that happen? Wow! That's pretty cool. Thanks, God. This month, I'm going to give you $20. And He says, test me, kid. See if you can't outgive me, because I promise you I got way more resources than you, and you can't. Like, okay. And so we follow Him. God, I'm really concerned about my coworker, but I'm afraid to have this conversation with him. Just trust me. Have that conversation like, hey, you know, have you ever thought about, like, this? And they're like, yeah. Thanks for sharing that with me. You know, I was afraid, and you've helped it. And you're like, wow, God, see, you show up in that. Again and again and again, I got to stop talking, but this stuff is so important. Look, transformation occurs in us and in others as we trust Him. So the more you trust Him, the more transformation occurs. The more transformation occurs, the more you trust Him. This is that cycle. It keeps happening and happening. And as you trust Him, it's easier, and you get more excited about loving this God because you see Him showing up in all of these ways for you. You're like, He is real. Let's go. And the next thing you know, you're saying, God, I am all in, whatever that takes. And people around me go, hey, Paul, you're different. Like, yeah, because God is good. God is good. As we love God, we're able to love others more. As we serve God, we're able to serve others more. And as we do all of this, we reveal more of God to those around us. So when we look at all of these people that believe differently, that behave differently, that think differently, that might look differently than us, guys, we got to get back to this. There are no rules and there are no laws. It is just love. And if we set up this conversation wrong, they might not ever see it again. It's critical that we get the gospel right. Man, love them like God's loved you. And let Him figure out all the sordid details of their lives, because He can. He's done it for me. He's probably done it for you. We've seen Him do it for Paul. And He can do it for anyone. Because He's a good God. Right? Yeah, let's pray.